Hello, good morning. Marvin Sylvester here. Today is the 23rd of April 2023. And where am I today? Today I am at Otaheite Bay in Otaheite. As you can see, all the fishing vessels behind me. Sitting on a fishing vessel right now. Weather-wise, as you can see, it's overcast. It's actually had some rain earlier today, and the rain probably stopped falling probably about half an hour ago. So yeah, most likely might get some more rain today. But anyway, how are you today? I hope all is well with you. As usual, all is well with me. And the first thing that I want to do again is, as usual, say thank you to everyone who's been supporting the channel. Thank you to everyone who's been viewing, liking, subscribing, and engaging with the channel, sharing the videos, etc. This week we managed to hit 50 subscribers and more. Again, thank you very much. Like I said in one of my other videos, for me this is a significant milestone as someone who is very new to doing this, right? So again, many thanks to everyone. I greatly appreciate it. So I know we have a few new subscribers, so I just wanna, or probably new viewers, so I just wanna give a quick recap on what this channel is about. Basically every week, hopefully, well, it's once a week for now. Hopefully in the future I'll be able to do more, but once a week I put out a video where I simply give my thoughts on things that are important to me, but I might also think are important to you, and they will mostly be in the realms of maritime, energy, and military/security, things that I am mostly familiar with based on my life experiences. But we'll also touch on other things like economy, finance, a little bit of geopolitics to some extent, and different things like that. So that is what this channel is about. For this week's main topic, I'm going to wrap up my conversation on de-dollarization that I started a couple weeks ago. We're also going to talk about a couple local and regional topics, right? So for the last couple weeks we've been talking about de-dollarization, right? And I just want to give a very quick recap on what we've discussed so far. I will post links to the last couple of videos on de-dollarization in the description, but let me just give a quick recap, right? So we defined de-dollarization in the last couple of videos. We defined de-dollarization, which is just basically countries moving away from use of the US dollar, whether it be for purchases or as a foreign exchange reserve, investing in US financial systems, whether it be as treasury, securities, bonds, shares, whatever it is, and that kind of thing, right? That's what de-dollarization is in a nutshell. We also spoke about who's doing it. I gave some examples like China, their recent purchase of LNG from UAE in yuan, India making purchases of oil in rupees and whatnot, right? I also spoke about some of the challenges that Trinidad may face. A little speculative, but I would have highlighted, if we want to go and start engaging Asian markets to sell our products, mainly LNG, I highlighted, a lot of these Asian countries are quote-unquote de-dollarizing, and they may want to pay us in their national currencies or in a designated currency other than the US. How do we treat with that? How do we deal with that? How do we prepare for that if that does happen? I also spoke about as some countries de-dollarize, they may decide to make a clean cut from the US financial system and dump certain investments that they have within the US financial system, which could cause major problems within the global financial system, which will ultimately impact us. So I mentioned that, speculative, but I mentioned that how do we deal with that, right? Because there is signs that certain countries are moving away from US financial system. China and Saudi Arabia, mainly, if you follow the news, they've been making less and less investments in the US companies and buying less and less US treasury bonds and all these different things. So food for thought, right? I also looked at some major quotes from world leaders. I shared some quotes from Emmanuel Macron, French president, and Brazil president Lula da Silva. And I also looked at the opposite side of things, a skeptical view of de-dollarization from a contributor to the American Institute of Economic Research. So that is where we've reached. And this week, as I wrap up de-dollarization, I want to focus on de-dollarization and we could say the Heritage Stabilization Fund, or future of the Heritage Stabilization from my point of view, a layman's point of view, right? But before I get into that, I wanted to just cover an interesting story that I came across this week. And as I explain this story, you'll see why it is I find it interesting, right? So it's a story, it's an article from a newsroom called First Post, dated the 18th of April 2023, right? So the subject of it is de-dollarization. Bangladesh ditches dollar to pay Russia in Chinese yuan for nuclear plant, right? It's an article by Umang Sharma. So let's get into this. Dhaka, which is the capital of Bangladesh, is constructing the nuclear power plants in collaboration with Russia's state-owned, and when they say power plants, it's because it's two building, right? With Russia's state-owned atomic company Rosatom in a $12.65 billion project. Now Rosatom is a big state-owned Russian company that specializes in the building of nuclear plants and selling nuclear technology to support the plants and all, right? I'm close to the main road, so you'll be hearing a lot of traffic. Right? Bangladesh's additional secretary of the ministry's Economic Relations Division, ERD, Uttam Kumar Karmaka, said because of sanctions against Russian banks, Dhaka was unable to process payments in US dollars. Russia asked us to settle the payments in their currency, rubles, but that was not feasible. So we both opted for yuan, Chinese yuan, right? Karmika was quoted saying by Nikkei Asia. Now, to me, this is a very interesting story. And why? Well, let me explain. So, what we see in here is that potentially the US sanctions could be fueling de-dollarization directly, because people saying a lot of things. Well, if you want to say theoretically or indirectly, because of what's happening in the US, because of certain geopolitical moves, because of potential future sanctions and whatnot, countries are moving away from the dollar. But this is a case where you're kind of seeing like the direct actions of the US is causing the de-dollarization that we're speaking about. And let me explain. Because of the US sanctions and the banks, this deal cannot go ahead even if both parties or one of the parties wanted to do the trade in US dollars. And it literally forced them to pursue the use of yuan to settle the deal. And again, it was interesting to me because we're talking about, in some cases, I've seen articles where people are accusing certain countries of taking hostile actions against the US and forcing de-dollarization on global south countries, if you want to put it that way. But in this particular case, nobody was particularly forcing the two parties involved in this nuclear deal to move away from the US dollar, in the sense that, they were saying the US dollar is bad or something like that. It was literally just because of the sanctions, they couldn't do it even if they wanted to. So I found that interesting and just food for thought, right? But anyway, so on to the main topic that I wanted to talk about this week, which is de-dollarization and the Heritage Stabilization Fund. So first of all, let me say I am not an economist, I'm not a finance expert or anything like that. These views are just my layman's views, and it is not financial advice or economic advice to anybody or anything, right? But just my thoughts. So what we know about the Heritage Stabilization Fund itself, we know it's our rainy day fund, right? It's set up so that in the event that the country needs money in an emergency to do certain things or whatever it is, we have something put aside, right? We know that it has approximately the value of it has approximately $5 billion, or 18.6% of GDP by the end of financial year 22. And last year the state deposited approximately $345 million US, or 1.3% of GDP, into the Heritage Stabilization Fund in 2022, as per the recent IMF staff report, right? So approximately $5 billion, and the recent and part of that $5 billion is the $345 million cash they put in it last year, right? So as the world de-dollarizes, I thought about this, and I thought about what is the current state of the fund and potentially how the fund could be insulated against the de-dollarization that we're seeing happening in the world. Just my thoughts, right? So I was prompted to look at what would probably be the most recent report about the HSF, Heritage Stabilization Fund. And I went onto our website, the central bank website, I believe it was, or finance website, and I found the last quarterly report, which was from April to June 2022, right? I believe this is the most recent report. That's the one I found on the site. And I'll post a link to it if anybody should want to go and see it, right? And the first thing I noticed was that a significant amount of the fund is invested into multiple US dollar investment portfolios, right? These US equity funds and short-term and long-term and whatnot, right? These financial instruments, as I believe they refer to them too. And they put the money in these things, and they're supposed to be safe, and somewhere down the road there's an expected return on this investment in the fund, right? As the government is expected to get a certain amount of profit at either a future date or during the life of the time that the funds invested in this financial instrument. If I'm mistaken on this, somebody could feel free to correct me, right? But in looking at the last report, I noticed, based on what it's saying, is that most of the report, as I said, is invested in US portfolios. And how did I come to this conclusion? That's because of this particular paragraph I'm going to read here, right? There's a paragraph in it that states the total net asset value of the fund as at the end of June 2022. Now we know we passed that period, but just listen to the figures, right? At the end of June 2022 was approximately $4.771 billion US, compared to US $5.2 $6.99 billion US dollars at the end of the previous quarter, which was the quarter before. Of this total, the investment portfolio was valued at and when you say the investment portfolio, what they have invested out of what they had at the time, right, was $4.769 billion, while the remaining portion was held in operating cash accounts to meet the day-to-day expenses that arise from the management of the fund. So let me just look at a couple figures, right? At that time, for that quarterly report, you have the total value of the fund, based on my simple understanding, was 4.771 billion US, and out of that 4.771, you have 4.769 billion out of that invested in US portfolios. So you can say almost the entire fund at that time was in US portfolios, right? That was the one key thing, right? Very, very little of it is held in, or very little portion of it is actually held in US cash. Then the other thing that I noticed from the report was that these portfolios all performed very badly during that quarter. And how did I come to that conclusion? Well, in the report it says this, right? And I'll read. I'm going to be doing a lot of reading today, so forgive me, right? It says, during the quarter, the HSF lost 9.9% of its value, while the main driver was the decline in equity assets, which was the same portfolio investments. The fixed income mandate also contributed to the negative performance. See table 1. The fixed income equity mandates declined by 1.74% and 8.33% respectively. See table 2. It also goes on to state the decline in the value of the HSF in the quarter ended June 2022 and the uncertain short-term outlook underscored the need to rebalance the fund in order to achieve better risk-return performance, or at the minimum preserve its capital value. After prolonged discussions, the board of the Central Bank HSF management team reached an agreement on the short-term rebalancing plan, which included the following as its key elements. 1. A reduction in the fund's equity mandate, mainly by reducing the fund's non-US equity holdings. And 2. A corresponding increase in the fund's fixed income mandate with a bias towards short-term duration securities, mainly US Treasuries and other high-quality fixed income securities. The implementation of the rebalancing plan began in August 2022. So and the report also goes on to explain that other reasons for the fund performing badly, from what I gathered, was, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, increasing global inflation, and increasing US Fed rate hikes, the central bank rate hikes in the US, right? All these things affected the fund. Now, despite all of that, what I gathered from reading the report and specifically those paragraphs is that despite all the challenges we see with the US portfolios at the moment, the rate hikes, inflation, and global geopolitical conflicts, the plan is still to reduce non-US portfolios, investment portfolios, and if I had to gather, to more or less reinvest in other types of US portfolios, US-based portfolios, investment portfolios, and to sort of double down in the US financial system. And I mean, that had me thinking. Now, I would never dare to advise the central bank or the technocrats or anybody, the management team and all these different people who do all these things, right? Of course, me, nah. I go stay in my lane when it comes to that. But what I could say is, if Marvin was doing in a position to make a decision or Marvin was the man with the say. Yes, Marvin. I would have looked at things a little differently or considered things a little differently based on what I am seeing going on in the world, especially with de-dollarization, right? That is just me. And what would I do differently? Well, first and foremost, we understand that as the fund is now $5 billion in value, I would say it still probably has around 4.7, 4.8 somewhere there billion in portfolios, and they recently put 345 million US into it. So me just doing some simple maths, it tells me that the fund still has not been performing that well. Because if it was almost 4.8 before, at around June 2022, and they put in almost 350 million into it, it should have ended up somewhere around 51, 52. But as it stands from the last report, it's still around 5. So that means the fund would have, my assumption, speculation, either they would have used from the fund, or the fund continued to perform a little badly still, it decreased in value, and then when you add in the 345 million, that is what bring it back up to 5. My speculation, but I stand to be corrected on that. Anybody could let me know what they think on that, if they have the facts and the figures and the evidence to prove. But my speculation is the firm still continued not to do so well into the later half of last year, and what helped to prop it back up is the money that the government put in into it. But if I find out the truth of the facts, I'll present that later on. But we have this 5 billion there, and we had to deal with it. And as I said, I would never say that Trinidad and Tobago should de-dollarize. I showed that our biggest export and import partner is the US. We're right in the US backyard. Yes, we're going to be using US dollars. And the 5 billion that there in the HSF, we had to deal with that, both the investments and cash. But in terms of the future, what could we look at going forward? Are we going to continue doubling down on USD only or mainly? Or are there alternatives that we could look at to help hedge against de-dollarization or any potential issues that will happen geopolitically in the near future? And I tell myself gold is the option. So if Marvin had a choice or a say on how to build the HSF going forward, I would say gold. And why would I say gold? I found these 8 reasons on Investopedia, and I want to read them out because I think these 8 reasons show exactly how I feel, and they reflect exactly why I think gold is the way forward in the future for building the Heritage Stabilization Fund. And forgive me again, I want to read them, right? A lot of reading today, but I'm just putting this information out there as to why it is I'm thinking in a particular way, right? So, like I say, this was an article from Investopedia dated the 20th of January 2023, so it's been out some time now. Title of it is 8 Good Reasons to Own Gold by Michael Bromberg, right? And it starts off: gold is respected around the world for its value and rich history, which has been recognized by cultures for thousands of years. Coins containing gold appeared around 650 BC, and the first pure gold coins were struck during the reign of King Coricius of Lydia about 100 years later, right? Throughout centuries, people have continued to hold gold for various reasons. Societies and now economies have placed value on gold, thus perpetuating its worth. It is a metal we fall back on when other forms of currency don't work, which means it always has some value as insurance against tough times. Below are 8 practical reasons to think about owning some gold. Right? Let's go into them. A history of holding its value. Unlike paper currency, coins or other assets, gold has maintained its value throughout the ages. People see gold as a way to pass on and preserve their wealth from one generation to the next. Since ancient times, people have valued the unique properties of the precious metal. That's 1.2. The weakness of the US dollar. Although the US dollar is one of the world's most important reserve currencies, when the value of the dollar falls against other currencies, as it did from 1998 to 2008, this often prompts people to flock to the security of gold, which raises gold prices. The price of gold nearly tripled from 1998 to 2008, reaching the $1,000 an ounce milestone in early 2008, and nearly doubling from 2008 to 2002, rising above the $2,000 mark. Right? Straightforward. Inflation hedge. Gold has historically been an excellent hedge against inflation because its price tends to rise when the cost of living increases. Over the past 50 years, investors have seen gold prices soar and the stock market plunge during high inflation years. This is because when fiat currency loses its purchasing power to inflation, gold tends to be priced in those currency units and thus tends to rise along with everything else. Moreover, gold is seen as a good store of value, so people may be encouraged to buy gold when they believe their local currency is losing value. Straightforward. Deflation protection. Deflation is defined as a period when prices decrease, business activity slows, and the economy is burdened by excessive debt. This has not been seen globally since the Great Depression of the 1930s, although a small degree of deflation occurred following the 2008 financial crisis in some parts of the world. During the Depression, the relative purchasing power of gold soared while other prices dropped sharply. This is because people chose to hoard cash, and the safest place to hold cash at the time was in gold and gold coins. Geopolitical uncertainty. Gold retains its value not only in times of financial uncertainty, but also in times of geopolitical uncertainty. It is often called the crisis commodity because people flee to its relative safety when world tensions rise. During such times, gold often outperforms other investments. Its price often rises the most when confidence in governments is low. Supply constraints. Much of the supply of gold in the market since the 1900s has come from the sale of gold bullion from vaults of global central banks. This selling by global central banks slowed greatly in 2008. At the same time, production of new gold mines had been declining since 2002. The recent decline in production suggests the potential for renewed pressure on gold supplies. It can take 5 to 10 years to bring a new gold mine into production. As a general rule, reduction in the supply of gold increases gold prices. Increase in demand. Next point. In previous years, increased wealth of emerging market economies boosted demand for gold. In many of these countries, gold is an integral part of the culture. In China, where gold bars are a traditional form of saving, the demand for gold has remained steadfast, and I'll come back to China in a little bit. India is the second largest gold consuming nation in the world. It has many uses there, including jewelry. As such, the Indian wedding season in October, traditionally the time of the year that fuels the highest global demand for gold. So, portfolio diversification. The key to diversification is finding investments that are not correlated with one another. Gold has historically had a negative correlation to stocks, other financial instruments. Recent history bears that out. One point, the late 1970s were great for gold but terrible for stocks. 1980s and 1990s were excellent for stocks but horrible for gold. In 2008, stocks dropped substantially as consumers migrated to gold. So what they're saying is properly diversified investors combine gold with stocks and bonds in a portfolio to reduce overall volatility risk, which is the same thing I more or less kind of stating. Yes, you have your equities and all these other nice things, no problem. I'm not saying to move away from it specifically, but divest into gold as well, right? Hold on. Next point, why should I invest in gold? There are many reasons to consider adding gold holdings to your investment portfolio. The precious metal has a history of maintaining its value, making gold a useful hedge against inflation. Gold prices tend to increase when the US dollar is underperforming or during times of economic and political uncertainty. Finally, gold can provide an important level of diversification to your portfolio, as gold prices have historically shown a negative correlation with other asset classes. What determines the price of gold? Gold prices can be volatile in the short term, but the metal has maintained its value over the long term, and this is true. In general, movements in the gold price depend on supply, demand, and investor behavior. Because the metal is often used to hedge against inflation, which we are experiencing now, the pace of inflation and market expectations for future inflation levels can have an impact on gold prices. In addition, deteriorating economic conditions may bolster gold prices because the metal is seen as a relatively safe investment in difficult times. Last couple points. How can I invest in gold? There are many vehicles for adding investment exposure to gold. It is possible to own the physical metal in forms such as bullion, coins, or jewelry, although storing and insuring physical gold assets can be costly, right? So, possible downside. Other possibilities include investing in a gold exchange traded fund or buying shares in mining companies that engage in the extraction and production of the precious material. Last point. Gold, the bottom line. Gold should be an important part of a diversified investment portfolio because its price increases in response to events that cause the value of paper investments such as stocks and bonds, and I would say equities and all these things too, to decline. Right? Although the price of gold can be volatile in the short term, it has always maintained its value over the long term. Through the years, gold has served as a hedge against inflation and the erosion of major currencies, and thus an investment well worth considering. So there you have it, right? Thank you for bearing with me with the reading, but there you have it. If I had the choice, I would have seriously considered acquiring more gold and quote-unquote doubling down on more different types of US financial investments, whether long-term, short-term, whatever it is, right? And I would use gold moving forward to help to preserve the wealth, to help to preserve the Heritage Stabilization Fund, right? And especially when you're taking de-dollarization into place, into consideration, taking all what we're seeing happening in the world, I think it's the safest, one of the more safer things that we should do, right? Also, just this morning, I saw an article, right, where it was stating that the BRICS countries are buying a lot of gold, right? It stated that China is rumored to already have purchased 120 tons of gold for the year just so far. Just 4 months into the year, 120 tons. And also, as these BRICS countries also buying a lot of gold, the plan is, or the rumor is, that it might also be what they will use to back the future currency, the future new currency that BRICS may be coming out with. Now, I'll touch on BRICS and all these different things in a future date, but it's just food for thought, people. Like I say, if it was me, I think gold is the way to go. And that brings me to the end of de-dollarization for now. And we'll be looking at some other new major topics going forward, right? So, on to some other local and regional news. So, Curtis Williams, the person, one of the senior editors there at the Express who I usually cover in the news, I saw some news that he's going to be pursuing a new opportunity in the US and at some point would be leaving the Express, I'm assuming. So as you all know, I used to cover a lot of his articles and he wrote a lot of good pieces in my opinion, right? So if he gets this message again, good luck in what it is you're pursuing. I enjoyed covering your articles. Whoever takes over your desk has a big shoes to fill. And yeah, all the best with that new opportunity once it happens. But just up to today, so he's still doing some writing for the Express. I saw an article in the Sunday Business Express which highlighted an issue where BP, there was an issue, some sort of issue, that is the word I want to use for now, issue on a BP platform which is creating challenges for gas with NGC. Some officials have been keeping silent on it. That's the insinuation I got. And even in the article, Mr. Ramnarine would have also made some of his points based on this new development. Now, I am not going to say much more on it because I'll wait until more things come out. I'll wait until probably the government responds or certain officials respond, and I'll take into consideration both sides of the argument when I'm discussing it. But this is a developing story. Now, if you remember what happened last week with the Trinity platform, I believe, platform Bravo, I was saying I really hope that we didn't have any more issues with our energy sector in terms of accidents or incidents or something like that. And that was last week Sunday, and by this Sunday began news of certain things happening. So not so good news for the country and our energy sector. But that also got me thinking about something that I discussed 2 Sundays ago, which was, you remember I covered that article where some Turkish company car power ship had a meeting with the energy minister and the energy ministry, and they made a presentation on their power ships, and I made a certain speculation. Well, I want to revise that speculation a little bit. So I was speculating then that, as you all know, a few months ago the minister had a special meeting with NGC, BP, Shell. And in that meeting, I speculated that from that meeting, they recognized that gas production in Trinidad is falling, and it will continue to fall for some time until new projects come on stream like Manatee Dragon and whatnot. And Mr. Ramnarine was saying more or less the similar thing in this article, this Sunday Business article. And I was saying that because of that projection, it was, I didn't think it was coincidence that you had power ship come in, making a presentation of bringing the ship that could supply electricity to the grid. Because as I also speculated, they have the Metanex plants, Titan and Atlas, that they would want to come back on stream. Those plants have been on standstill for a while. You also have the new steel plant, the former ArcelorMittal plant that they want to bring back, that uses a lot of power. I think it was something like 17 or 20% of the total amount of electricity the country uses. And they want to get these things back up, so they would need the power ship to supply additional power to the grid to ensure electricity security. I still think that kind of holds, but also based on the fact that as a country we can't afford to have major shocks to our electricity production, because we use a lot of our gas to produce electricity, right? Because as a country we can't afford to have shocks. When these shocks happen upstream, any disruption that happens upstream, and we get less gas coming into NGC to supply, whether it's gas to T&T for electricity production or gas to energy companies operating in Port Lisas. That is the probably another big reason why the power ship was in Trinidad recently giving a presentation. So I think I speculating here, but I think it's all connected. I think that is also part of the reason why power ship was here in Trinidad as well. Who knows? I could be completely wrong and connected incorrect dots, but and if anybody knows anything or has any information that I could share or you wish to share, let me know. I would have shared in another video this week one of my different handles. You can send me a message directly through email or whatever it is, and yeah, let me know. I'll share it. But that is just my speculation. So all these sorts of situations probably being taken into consideration as that power ship was coming and making that presentation. But we'll see how it goes, right? And the last thing I'm going to close up with this week, the last thing that was interesting to me this week, well, as you all know, is I've been covering the Alfa Nero mega yacht saga for the last few weeks, and I haven't heard much difference from the last report that I made last weekend, but I saw an article in Boat International dated the 18th of April. The title of that article was Alfa Nero ownership of 81-meter super yacht transferred to the government ahead of sale. It's written by Holly Overton and Katia Damborski. So hold on, I think it have some big rig passing here. So hold on, maybe I could just show you all it. Hold on. Some big rig passing here. So maybe that is what the police were going with. They were probably the outriders guiding the traffic, because this thing big, this thing taking up the whole road. This is some big rigs or something looks like going on in the oil and gas sector here. I think most likely I'll just take this section here and crop this out and put it as a separate video with all the noise, and I'll have this separate. So see, I think it's with Trinity Offshore, Trinity Lift Boats or something, so on the logo. This is the last rig here. The last rig here. And I'm going up the road. Yeah, that's the last of it, because look, the kind of outrider vehicles going up the road here. They usually tend to do these things on a Sunday when they don't have much traffic on the road, because as you can see, those rigs or whatever is massive, take up a lot of the road. So yeah, alright, anyway, back to the video. So yeah, so this article from Boat International, I think I'll just read it out. It's not too long, kind of short, and it kind of summarizes where we are at this moment until we get any future news, right? So I'll just read it out. It's very short. The ownership of the abandoned 81.3 meter Oceano super yacht Alfa Nero has been transferred to the government of Antigua and Barbuda ahead of the yacht's sale by auction, which is expected to be finalized later this month. So soon. The seizure is the latest chapter in the long saga that began in February 2022, when the vessel was blocked from leaving the port of Antigua, subject to an official search to determine whether the ultimate beneficiary owner had been named on the international sanctions list following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The yacht has since been deemed abandoned, and notice of the government's intent to sell the vessel was publicized in March 2023. According to sources speaking to Boat International, the yacht has received significant interest from prospective buyers. And like I said, I think in my last video, there are about 20 bidders already lined up for this boat, right? Prime Minister of Antigua Barbuda, Gaston Brown, said the government was determined to ensure the sale goes ahead with no pitfalls. An application to delist the yacht as a sanctioned vessel has been submitted, I mentioned that last week, which will allow the yacht to cruise freely in U.S. waters when she comes under new ownership. The yacht is now insured, and Brown said that liabilities incurred by staffing, crew, refueling, provisioning, and some maintenance upkeep will fall to the government of Antigua Barbuda, the newest owner for now, right? According to the government, the vessel received more than $500,000 worth of fuel during her stay in Antigua. Funds from the sale will be used to pay the yacht's captain and crew, as well as other creditors that have been providing fuel and supplies. The Port Authority Act was recently amended and passed in Parliament, allowing for the sale of the vessel, which has been valued at $81 million. Now, you remember when I did my video last week, I speculated that even though most articles were saying $120 million US, I speculated that it would sell for probably around $80 million or somewhere close to that. And now it's being valued at $81 million. I personally think that is the figure that the Antigua Barbuda government is looking for. Me personally. But time will tell. And as more news comes up with it, I'll share. But anyway, that brings me to the end of the articles that I am covering this week. This video is much longer than usual, so if you've watched the entire video, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. Once again, if you've enjoyed the video, as long as it was, please continue to like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell so that you get the notifications when I put up future videos. Also, if you really enjoyed the video, there will be a link to my Buy Me a Coffee where you could provide further support to the channel to help us to continue to grow. And yeah, that will be it. So as I usually close off, my usual slogan, if you want to put it that way, please continue to keep informed, stay vigilant, and be prepared. Please also have a wonderful day whenever you see this video. Have a wonderful week, and as usual, take care. Right? Bye bye.